Welcome to another wonderful Susanna Calloway audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free, clean Western romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Susanna Calloway, Western romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. The Marshall's Christmas Bride. Chapter 1. Are you certain you're all right with this? Catherine glanced up at her father as they walked. Are you, Papa? James Lind offered her a barking laugh and adjusted the bundle on his back. No, I'm not, sweetheart. But neither of us has much choice, do we? The icy Illinois wind blew through Catherine's heavy woolen cloak and whipped her red-gold hair across her shoulders. The long walk from the mercantile store to James's butcher shop across town usually took an hour. Today, with the blustery November breeze chilling her hands and feet, it seemed far longer to Catherine. You read Jenny's letter, didn't you? She asked, carrying the wrapped parcel that contained cloth and thread for new gowns. She sounds so happy. She and Dan are planning their first Christmas together. Catherine sighed. So romantic. Maybe I'll be married by Christmas, Papa. Just because this mail-order bride thing worked for your sister, don't mean it will work as well for you. Doesn't that worry you? She nodded. I am a little scared, Catherine admitted. Wyoming is a long way from here. I certainly don't want to see all my daughters run off to the wilderness to find husbands, James grumbled. But as it stands now, there are no suitable bachelors in town, and not that many more in the county. You're 18, past the age of marriage, girl. I know. She recognized her father's plight. A small-town butcher with a big family, consisting of a wife and 6 daughters, with barely enough money to feed them and none remaining for dowries. Her older sister Jenny, at 19, left home and hearth to go west as a mail-order bride, snagging herself a rancher. Behind Catherine were 4 sisters with ages ranging from 16 to 10. Her father could breathe easier financially with 2 daughters out of the house and married. Which one do you like, Papa? James frowned. It's your choice to make. You're the one marrying him. But they all seem so nice. She settled the parcel into her other hand and rubbed some of the chill from her cheeks. I'm having trouble choosing. For a long while, her father said nothing. They approached their butcher shop and their home above it. Catherine craved a cup of hot tea, something to warm her from the inside out. She had all but forgotten her question to her father and jumped a little when he spoke. Caspar Mulroney, he finally said. In Suicide Falls. She recalled the letter from Mr. Mulroney, the town marshal in a neighboring village not far from Plum River where Jenny lived. She didn't see much difference between his letter and the 3 others she'd received. The others came from men in Plum River, and Catherine thought it best to reside closer to her sister. Why him? She asked. The others are from a farmer, a miner, and a rancher, James said. All dependent upon the land, the weather. Their fortunes could rise or fall with equal risk. The town marshal has a job for life, Catherine. He is a protector, and I would see you marry a man like that. I see. He chuckled. He also had the nicest penmanship. Why is that important? Catherine asked, wondering if her father was joking. But he wasn't. Writing with a decent hand informs me he is intelligent and educated. The others wrote as though they were barely literate. I feel that a man with an educated background will take the best care of my daughter. Then I'll trust your judgment, Papa, Catherine said, opening the door to the shop. I'll write to Mr. Mulroney today. And to your sister, James said as they walked into the shop hung with dead and plucked chickens and turkeys, and sides of beef and pork. The place smelled of blood and meat. Jenny had a place to stay while she became acquainted with Dan Ellis. Suicide Falls is not too far from Plum River, close enough for you to live with Jenny while Mr. Mulroney courts you. Catherine nodded, although she considered the distance unhandy. She took her bundle to her mother, who smiled from behind the counter. To tell the truth, Papa, I'm grateful to have Jenny there for me. If things go wrong, let's not borrow trouble. James set his own bundle on the counter and took his wife's hand. I've investigated train fares. This late in the year, snow could interfere with a stagecoach, and there's a train leaving for Wyoming next week. Your letter to the marshal will barely beat you there. Catherine glanced from one parent to the other, her chest tight. That's so soon. Her mother, Margaret, came out from behind the counter to embrace her. Tears glowed in her eyes. I hate to see you go, Catherine. But as long as two of my girls are together, I can be content. I may never see you again. Nonsense, child. We will find a way to visit. I promise. Chapter 2. Holding the letter closer to the light of the fire in the stove, Caspar scanned it quickly, his eyes devouring the page. A neat and tidy hand informed him that Catherine Lind accepted his gracious offer of marriage and would arrive in early December on the train. It also read that she intended to stay with her sister outside Plum River until the wedding could be planned and carried out. Excitement coursed through him as he reread it over and over, committing it to memory. What does it say, Marshall? Asked Mrs. Newcomb. He glanced up at the wife of the station master, unable to halt his grin. She said yes. Setting her knitting on her lap, the old lady patted her hands together in petite applause. Congratulations, dear boy. Now write her immediately and express our wishes that your young lady stay with us until such time as the wedding might be planned appropriately. It says she plans to stay with her sister in Plum River, he said, handing over the letter. That way we can get to know one another before the wedding. Mrs. Newcomb frowned. But Plum River is quite a spell away, dear. True, but it wouldn't be impossible to spend time with her, Mrs. Newcomb, Caspar said. Lind, she murmured, gazing down at the missive. Where have I heard that name before? A young lady named Jenny Lind arrived a few months ago to marry James Matthews, Caspar said. Matthews dumped her in favor of the banker's widow, remember? Of course. That poor girl fled suicide falls in shame. Are they related? Yes, indeed. Sisters. Jenny married that rancher, Dan Ellis. Oh, very good. I am so glad things worked out well for her. Such a pretty thing. Mrs. Newcomb eyed Caspar sidelong, a smile twitching her lips. Perhaps her sister is as equally attractive. He chuckled. I'm counting on it. Had Jenny Lind not run when she did, I'd have courted her. James was a fool to let her go. Mrs. Newcomb sniffed. I heard that Widow Betsy is making life for him very miserable indeed. He hoped he'd have her money to spend, and she's too miserly to permit him the coin to buy a frock coat for Sunday services. Caspar took back his precious letter and tucked it away into an inner pocket of his coat. Then I reckon it's the pittance he earns as a clerk at the bank that gives him the money to get drunk most every night. Mrs. Newcomb sighed down her nose. Though gossip surely is a sin, I hear that Widow Betsy imbibes nearly as often as her young husband. Sad, really. Liquor is the tool of the devil to make people foolish. Yes, well, that may be, Mrs. Newcomb, he said, putting his hat back on as he walked toward the door. But it keeps people like me employed. My regards to Mr. Newcomb. Untying the reins to his horse, a short, stocky piebald mustang, he glanced up to find Ned Barlow, the saloon keeper, rushing down the sidewalk toward him. In his haste, he hadn't put on a coat in spite of the icy November wind. Marshall, he's at it again, puffed the short chubby man. Please hurry. Caspar sighed. I should start charging him rent to sleep in my jail cell. Can't you run him out of town? The man is a menace. He's harmless, Ned, Caspar said, swinging into his saddle. And he always pays for the damage he causes. It's not right, grumbled Ned. And when are you going to get a real horse? Stonewall Jackson is a real horse, Caspar replied, nudging the gelding into a walk. Didn't he outrun your thoroughbred last summer? Don't remind me. He heard the noise a few blocks from the saloon, wild yells and the sound of wood splintering. A chair. Ned's piano player, 2 cowboys, and the saloon girl stood outside the doors, staring inside. Reining in, Casper tied Jackson to the rail, and ducked between the cowboys to walk into the saloon. Another yell greeted his entrance, and he quickly stepped aside in case he needed to duck a thrown object. Many times, he dodged bottles, full and empty, as they hurtled toward him. "It's me, Watson," he said, glancing around. Only one chair had been smashed this time. Not bad, considering. "It's Casper." A shadow stumbled out from near the blazing hearth, a chunk of firewood in its hand. "Damn heathens," the shadow screamed. Casper instantly leaped out of the way as the wood sailed through the air toward his head. The chunk missed completely and struck the wall. "Quit it, Watson," Casper yelled. "Drop whatever is in your hand and get over here right now." The figure walked toward him, the shadows releasing him from their grip. The man dressed in plain homespun trousers and cotton shirt appeared to be a prosperous gentleman, perhaps a merchant or banker, until one drew close. Only then could the insane light in his eyes be seen. "The heathens is coming," he warned, his tone harsh. "Beware them, they come with knives to scalp the innocent." Though he held another stick in his fist, he made no move to throw it. Casper rose from his crouch, eyeing the man warily. "Put that down, Watson." "But, they're coming. I must have a weapon." "No one is coming, son. You had too much to drink." Again. The crazy light in Watson's eyes faded, and he blinked. "Casper?" "Yeah, it's me." Wood thudded to the floor as Watson gazed around at the saloon, the others slowly returning as quiet descended. Ned stood in the doorway, scowling at the single smashed chair. "I had another episode, didn't I?" "You did, indeed," Casper replied, taking him by the arm. "And just earned another night in jail. How many times have I told you to stop drinking?" Leading Watson past the annoyed saloon keeper and the cowboys, Casper hesitated as Watson half turned around. "I didn't damage the piano, did I?" he asked. After a quick glance at the musician sitting down on his stool and inspecting his pride and joy, Casper shook his head. "Doesn't look like it." He mounted his horse and used the beast to urge Watson down the half-frozen street. The young man hung his head, stumbling often, as he walked toward the town marshal's office. People they passed stared at him, most of their eyes curious while others condemned. Casper knew what Watson had gone through during his journey west, and how his shattered mind still played evil tricks on him after he drank too much. Yet, inexplicably, Watson needed the alcohol to help keep the nightmares at bay. His eyes watery under the onslaught of the chill wind, Watson waited outside the marshal's office as Casper dismounted and tied Jackson to the rail. Without being told, Watson staggered toward the 2 cells that stood to the back of the small office, and entered the one on the right. Casper closed the door and locked it as Watson sank onto the narrow cot. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll be back later with some supper." "I'm not hungry." "You might change your mind," Casper said, heading to the wood stove. Opening it, he added wood to the flames there, building up enough heat to keep the office warm. "Will you be all right?" Watson offered him a bleary smile. "I'm safer in here than out there." "No one will hurt you, Watson," Casper said. "I just wish I could help somehow." "You do, Casper. You done more for me than anyone in this town ever has." Casper shook his head, then lifted the collar of his coat against his neck. "I'll be back later." Chapter 3. Thus on a cold, snowy afternoon in early December, the train carrying Catherine and her bags of clothing, her supply of food for the trip, and the Bible her mother gave her arrived in Plum River, Wyoming. Catherine gazed eagerly out the window, searching for Jenny among the people, carriages, and snorting horses with their breath making smoky plumes in the chill air. With a sharp whistle and the hiss of steam, the train pulled into the station, and rocked to a gentle halt. A porter helped carry Catherine's canvas bags to the platform as she stepped quickly through the door, searching the crowd for her sister. "Kate." Catherine spotted Jenny waving wildly from the left of the group of townspeople eagerly awaiting the travelers or the mail. A stocky, dark-haired man held the reins to 3 horses behind her, heavy blankets over the saddles of 2 of the mounts. Catherine hurried through the press of people and threw herself into her sister's arms. "Jenny, Jenny, Jenny," she cried, trying to hold back the tears. "I'm so happy to see you." "You're finally here," Jenny choked, obviously fighting her own need to weep. "And you're to be married, just like me." Jenny pulled away and gestured to the man behind her, taking his hand. "Kate, this is my husband, Dan. Dan, this is Catherine." Dan smiled through his dark beard and took one of Catherine's hands in his. He planted a respectful kiss on her cheek. "Welcome, Catherine. I've been eager to meet some of Jenny's family." "My pleasure, Dan," Catherine replied, smiling at her brother-in-law. While he wasn't a truly handsome man, she recognized a steadiness in him, a solidness to his nature that spoke of responsibility and caring. Jenny certainly found herself a good one. The porter set Catherine's bags on the wooden walkway, then vanished into the milling crowd. As Jenny spoke of a spare room at the ranch house, Dan tied the bags to the cantles. He assisted both to mount, then set the blankets around their waists and legs to keep them warm. "I sent one of the hands to Suicide Falls," he said as he swung into his saddle. "He should be back by the time we get to the ranch with word of when Caspar Mulroney might be able to meet you. He is a good man with a solid reputation, Catherine. I want you to know that." "Thank you, Dan," Catherine said, reining her horse to follow Jenny's. "I confess I'm a bit nervous about this whole thing." Jenny halted long enough for Catherine to ride up beside her and took her hand. "I won't see you marry anyone you don't want to, Kate. If Marshall Mulroney isn't right, you'll stay with us until you do find the perfect man." Catherine grinned. "Just like you did, I hope." Chapter 4. Dan's hired man returned from Suicide Falls a mere hour after Catherine, Jenny, and Dan arrived at the ranch house. As Dan cared for the horses in the barn, Jenny showed her sister to her small room, a windowless addition to the house opposite the main bedroom where Jenny slept with her husband. Since the room stood farthest away from the huge river rock fireplace, it had its own small wood stove with a neat pile of wood nearby. While Jenny started a fire in it, Catherine unpacked her gowns and hung them on pegs. Her Bible went onto the table beside the narrow bed. "You have a nice house, Jenny," Catherine said as Jenny showed her around. "Your first Christmas with Dan, too. I hope I'm married by Christmas." "Dan's father built the place," Jenny said. "He died when Dan was quite young, leaving him this ranch. Dan has since built upon it, expanding the land and the cattle. He sounds like a good man." The front door opened to herald Dan, another man, and a blast of ice-cold air. Catherine, shivering, hurried toward the blazing fire as Jenny followed, teeth chattering, on her heels. "Catherine," Dan said, ushering the old cowboy forward. "This is Jed." He spoke to Marshall Mulroney. Jed swept his hat off. "Ma'am. He done asked that you meet him in Plum River the day after tomorrow. At the Borden house, ma'am." Catherine glanced at her sister. "Will you come with me?" "Of course. Mrs. Donovan and I will be your chaperones." "Papa gave me a little money," Catherine said. "Would I be too forward if I offered to buy him tea? Or coffee? After all, he'll have ridden a long way to meet me." Jenny laughed, removing her bonnet and letting her long dark braids swing down over her shoulder. "Once Mrs. Donovan knows you're there to meet your future husband, she'll offer hot tea on the house." As the two men walked back outside, closing the door on yet another wave of chilled wind, Catherine wrung her hands. "Jenny, what if he doesn't like me?" "How can he not, Kate? You're prettier than me, a better cook, though I am better at sewing." "Jenny." Her sister laughed, then took Catherine by the arm. She sobered as she urged her to sit on the davenport made of spotted cowhide. "Kate, I know this is frightening, believe me I know. I went through it. When James told me he made a mistake in offering to marry me, leaving me with no money and no place to go. I thought my only option was becoming a lady of the night. No. If I hadn't gotten word that Mrs. Donovan needed a helper at the boarding house, I don't know what would have happened. I certainly wouldn't have met Dan. I guess I'm trying to tell you that you have options. If this Marshall Mulroney proves to be someone you cannot marry, then you will live here with us until you find the right man. Catherine took Jenny's hand. I'm so grateful to you. I promise you I won't become a burden to you or Dan. I know you won't. Now, I promised Dan his favorite, chicken and dumplings. Care to help? Catherine stood up. You haven't shown me the kitchen yet. Chapter 5. Caspar dressed carefully for his first meeting with Catherine. Shaving carefully at the washstand in his room at Mrs. Donovan's boarding house, he stared at his reflection in the mirror. God knew he wasn't the best-looking man in Wyoming, but he wasn't the worst either. Should have gotten a haircut, he thought. He examined his collar-length black hair critically, then brushed it back, away from his face. His eyes were too far apart, his nose too long, but at least he wasn't missing any teeth like so many men and women. Tying the slender string tie under his collar, Caspar donned his black coat and buttoned it. Checking the way it fit across his shoulders, he finally snorted in exasperation. Acting like a fool, he told his reflection. Girl already agreed to marry you. But what's to stop her from changing her mind if she doesn't like you? Nothing, far as I can see. Unlike many women who came west as mail-order brides, Catherine had people here. She had her sister to fall back on if she found him disagreeable or offensive, or if he mishandled his courtship of her. Other less fortunate women had no choice but to marry the men they came west to meet, and if their bridegrooms turned out to be abusive rogues, they were stuck with them. In his 5 years as the Marshal of Suicide Falls, he'd known of a few men who beat their wives on a regular basis. He himself found it sickening, but as it wasn't against the law, so there wasn't a whole lot he could do. A discreet tap at his door heralded Mrs. Donovan's arrival to tell him the Lynn sisters were downstairs. Coming, he said, then took another quick glance at himself in the mirror. Opening the door, he found Mrs. Donovan eyeing him up and down critically. Amused, he lifted his brow. Am I acceptable, ma'am? She reached up to adjust his tie, smoothed his lapels with her hands, then finally nodded. Remember, Marshall, I am quite fond of Jenny Ellis, and thus fully protective of her sister. While I truly do approve of the match between you and Catherine, be warned I will not tolerate any misbehavior on your part. Have I made myself clear? Caspar grinned. He bowed to her, wrapping his boot heels together smartly. Indeed, you have, Mrs. Donovan. I will endeavor to be the perfect gentleman both under your roof and away from it. The girls are having tea by the fireplace, Mrs. Donovan stated as she turned to walk to the stairs. If you consent to join them, laddie, I will bring another cup and a fresh pot. Closing his door, Caspar followed on her heels, trying not to appear too eager. He had no idea what impression he might make by being eager, nor what a lack of eagerness might tell his prospective bride about his character. Throwing caution to the wind, he imitated Mrs. Donovan's straight-backed, sedate walk, and descended the stairs. He stopped at the final landing. Mrs. Donovan continued on to the kitchen without looking back, leaving him to gaze down into the drawing room and gape. He recognized Jenny Ellis instantly. He'd never forget that tiny elfin face with those huge dark eyes, nor the thick braid that hung over her shoulder to her waist. If she hadn't gotten on the stage when she had, he planned to offer her his protection and court her himself. Had fate been different, she'd be his wife right now and not Ellis's. Yet. His gaze shifted to the girl next to her and his heart beat hard in his chest. Her eyes met his, and he was lost. Simple as that. Hazel green eyes, not brown, if he was seeing correctly. Her face had those same deep dimples when she smiled, and her thick red gold hair fell loosely down her back with a tidy fringe over her brow. She had Jenny's elfin face, and tiny body that just begged for a man to fit his hands over that waist and find his fingers meeting. Finally drawing a breath, Caspar felt slightly dizzy as he completed the final steps down. Both girls watched him as he crossed the drawing room floor toward them, but his approach was interrupted by Mrs. Donovan appearing with a wooden tray, a steaming pot and another cup. She shot him a half-glance that instantly told him to get his feet moving. He obeyed, and finished crossing the drawing room to their table. "Ladies," Mrs. Donovan said as she poured his tea. "This is Marshall Casper Mulroney from Suicide Falls. Marshall, I have the honor to introduce Mrs. Jenny Ellis, and her sister, Miss Catherine Lind." Casper bowed formally. "I do know Mrs. Jenny Ellis somewhat. But it is a pleasure to meet two such beautiful ladies today. May I join you for tea?" Catherine blushed and stared at the table, so it was Jenny who gestured for him to take the chair opposite. "Please do so, Marshall. I remember you from my short time in Suicide Falls." Knowing it would be romantic suicide to inform her how he'd planned to court her if she hadn't decanted when she had, he merely smiled as he sat down. "I remember you as well, Mrs. Ellis. I wish you to know something." Jenny stirred sugar into her cup. "What would that be, Marshall?" "Your former betrothed, James Matthews, is a most unhappily married man. You might take some satisfaction that his fate decreed some punishment for his boorish treatment of you." Jenny laughed. "I am taking much satisfaction in that, good sir. Thank you for telling me." As they spoke, Catherine finally lifted her eyes from the table but sent him only flickering glances. He wasn't sure what that meant. He suspected that either she found herself terribly shy or perhaps found him repugnant. He feared the latter while hoping for the former. Jenny nudged her sister. "Kate, you haven't said hello." Casper found himself gazing into twin green pools before they shied away. "My apologies, Marshall," Catherine said, her voice soft. "You must think ill of me. I'm not normally this shy. But I can't seem to help myself. I've never met a prospective husband before." "Nor have I met a prospective bride," Casper said, itching to take her hand if she put it on the table. "Of course, you're forgiven for any shyness at all." He received a fast flash of those incredible eyes and the dimples, then both vanished as she gazed down. To his amazement, Jenny stared at her sister with a slight frown. What he knew of Jenny before her departure from his town was that she was nearly as shy as her sister. Perhaps being courted and married gave her a confidence she formerly lacked. And he, with his limited experience with women, had no idea how to bring Catherine from her shell. Apparently, Jenny did have an idea. "Marshall, why don't you tell us some stories from your experience as a lawman?" Catching on, Casper regaled them with some of the more humorous and light-hearted adventures in his 5 years as the town marshal. He included Watson, without his obvious psychosis, in his stories, and within 10 minutes Catherine gazed at him with awe, smiling and laughing along with Jenny. It wasn't long before she, too, begged him for more tales and fired questions at him. Now both her hands were on the table as she took her tea, her hazel eyes on him. But he knew if he reached to take one of her hands, she'd snatch it back and retreat into the shyness again. He wanted her trusting him, looking at him as she might a beloved fiancé, not as an amorous buck searching for his doe. Suddenly, he felt glad they weren't thrown together the moment she arrived in Wyoming. Had she met him on their wedding day, fresh from the train, she'd no doubt turn her natural shyness into a barrier over which no love would cross. She might bear his children, cook his meals, sew his socks, but perhaps she'd never love him. And despite his urgent need for a wife, his more pressing desire for Catherine to love him preceded all else. He would have her love or nothing at all. Chapter 6. Dan snored softly on the davenport near the blazing fire as Jenny and Catherine entered, softly closing the door behind them. After spending the morning and half the afternoon with Marshall Mulroney, drinking Mrs. Donovan's tea and eating her biscuits, the sisters finally mounted their horses and turned heads for home. Snow fell as they trotted and cantered the miles down the road toward the ranch, unable to talk much through their teeth chattering from the cold. Jed took their mounts to care for at the barn, permitting them to hurry into the house and warmth. In the kitchen, Jenny took off her cloak and hung it on a peg, then opened the stove to feed it more wood. Catherine took her cloak off, hung it next door, and shivered in front of the flames. Why does it seem colder here than Illinois? She asked through clenched teeth. We weren't ever out in the cold for more than an hour at a time, Jenny replied, rubbing her arms. Girls stayed in, boys always went out. Catherine laughed. And here we just rode for 2 hours in the snow. As Jenny cut a roast from a pork shoulder hanging in the cold pantry, Catherine diced potatoes, onions, carrots and peppers into a pot to boil, then added salt, pepper, and some spices from a tin. As their supper cooked, Catherine finally talked. He's very handsome, she said with a sigh. I like him. Why was it so hard for you to talk to him? Jenny asked. I've never known you to be so tongue-tied. I was fine until he looked at me, Catherine admitted, stirring the pot. Then, whatever I wanted to say sounded so stupid. Foolish. Like a child. He didn't think of you as a child. Maybe not. But I felt like one. Here he is, a marshal and a lawman, and all I could do was gape like an idiot. He probably thinks I'm a twit now. Jenny snorted. No, he doesn't. How do you know? He couldn't stop looking at you, dear. Men who think women are fools find themselves easily bored and look for something else to occupy their attention. You captivated him, Kate. No doubt about it. Catherine blushed, smiling. You think so? You're only a year older than me, how can you be so sure? I taught her a lot. Dan's entrance into the conversation startled them both. Jenny rose from tending the roast to cross the kitchen and kiss him. Catherine glanced away from their moment of tenderness, blushing. They are so in love with one another. Will I have that with the marshal? She tried to imagine herself kissing Casper that way and blushed harder. You see, Kate, Dan said, sitting at the table. When a man is interested in a woman, he can't take his eyes off her. Like, I can't take my eyes off your sister, and I am way beyond being merely interested. Jenny laughed. I've found that men tend to be rather single-minded when it comes to what interests them. Unable to engage in a conversation so personal, Catherine tried to change the subject. It's snowing quite hard now, Dan, she said, stirring the potatoes. Will your cattle be all right? Yes, he said as Jenny once more turned the spit with the roast on it. As long as it stays above freezing, they'll be fine. When the wind picks up and the temperatures drop, then there's a danger. Usually though, the cattle find shelter in the hills and withstand the weather, unless it gets so cold and snows so much they get trapped. Then I would lose a large number of cattle. Catherine shivered. I hope that doesn't happen often. Poor things. Every rancher loses a few head each winter, Dan said. If I know the weather will turn bad, I bring them down, closer to the ranch. That way I can throw them feed that keeps them warm through the really bad cold snaps. Casper will remain in Plum River another day, Jenny announced, testing the roast. Dan, I want Kate to ride into town tomorrow. His brows rose. Alone? Mrs. Donovan agreed to chaperone them, she said. Kate must get acquainted with him without me being in the way. Then I'll saddle a horse first thing. Catherine gazed from one to the other. I am here, present and accounted for, you know. I should have a say in this, don't you think? Yes, dear, Jenny said without glancing up. But since you insist upon being shy, I have to push you at times. Try shove and you'll be closer to the mark, sister dear. Jenny straightened. Do you like him? Well, yes. Then you need to spend some alone time with him. Please drop the shyness and get to know the man. Long distance is tough enough for a courtship without feigned shyness added to the mix. Catherine gazed at Dan, who pursed his lips. Her Highness has spoken, he intoned. Feigned shyness? Catherine demanded. And I suppose you were all confidence and maturity when Dan courted you. Actually, Dan said before catching both sets of infuriated female eyes. I reckon I'll wait supper out here. He departed with some haste, leaving Catherine to glare at Jenny. Yes, I was, Jenny replied, her nose high. Catherine's ire immediately escalated. She'd always hated it when Jenny did that, even when they were little. Miss Perfect Jenny, she snapped. Always at her best even when at her worst. Jenny's nose immediately dropped. Red suffused her face, and her eyes fell. "No," she said softly. "I'm hardly perfect. I'm sorry, Kate. I shouldn't have goaded you like that. I came here to Plum River scared out of my mind. If it weren't for Mrs. Donovan, I'd have gone mad with it. You are quite right to be shy, worried, and concerned. Caspar Mulroney may have a good reputation, but you don't know him." Catherine reached across the table to grasp Jenny's hand. "You have no idea how scared I am right now," she whispered. Jenny raised a faint smile. "Your fears aren't the same as my fears, but they are real, Kate. And you have a right to them. I can be brave," she said. "If you're here with me. I am here for you, baby sister, for as long as you need me." Chapter 7. Caspar watched her ride into town as he stood in front of the boarding house early the next morning. He expected her sister to be with her, but this time Catherine rode alone. He stepped forward to take her horse's bridle as she reined in beside Jackson. She seemed different somehow, met his gaze evenly, her smile natural. "Good morning, Marshall," she said, accepting his hand, helping her dismount. "And right back to you, Miss Lind," Caspar said, tying her reins to the rail. "May I compliment you? You look lovely this morning." She laughed. "I fear it's the cold weather making my cheeks turn red." Escorting her up the steps and through the door to the boarding house, Caspar took her hand, half expecting her to withdraw or jerk away from him. She didn't do either, and walked beside him into the warm drawing room as though holding his hand was the most natural thing in the world. Mrs. Donovan lifted a brow at the sight, but merely gestured for them to be seated at a table. "You have to leave today?" Catherine asked as he held her chair. "Early tomorrow," he replied, taking his own seat. "It'll take me much of the day to ride, even with Jackson's endurance." "Jackson?" "My Mustang. Stonewall Jackson, obviously named for the Confederate general. That short black and white out front?" Caspar grinned. "Don't let his size fool you. He can outrun and outlast any horse in Wyoming territory. He can run all day, then all night, and still have enough capacity to gallop another day. I don't think I've ever seen a Mustang. I'll introduce you." As Mrs. Donovan served tea and biscuits, Caspar asked Catherine questions about her life in Illinois, and he found her shyness all but gone. Once again, her beauty stunned him. Once the block of nervousness had dropped, her obvious intelligence and wit rose to the surface. He'd always liked women who could carry an intelligent conversation, and it offered him something to look forward to on long winter nights. He discovered she loved books, poetry, horses and kittens, long rides, picnics, and most of all, Christmas. "It's only 2 weeks away," she said, as though confiding a secret. "I'd always dreamed of a Christmas in my own home. And someday, children playing under the tree. Kissing under the mistletoe," he added. Catherine blushed, but laughed. "That, too. It can happen for you," Caspar said, sipping his tea. "We can marry at any time." "I know." She stared into the fire's dancing flames. "Please bear in mind I wish to know you better before we wed. I want to know that I could, well, love you." Smiling inwardly, Caspar reached across the table and took her hand. "I want that more than anything, Catherine." "Caspar, do you think you might be able to love me in return? I'm already halfway there." He glanced up when Mrs. Donovan arrived to pour more tea, and he noticed her faint approving smile. An idea came to him. "Catherine, would you like to come back with me to Suicide Falls? You can stay with Mr. and Mrs. Newcomb." Mrs. Donovan straightened, her smile vanishing. "Who might these people be, laddie?" "Mr. Newcomb runs the station," he replied. "They already expressed their desire that Miss Lind stay with them as we get acquainted." "Catherine?" Smiling and looking eager, Catherine nodded. "I'd like that, Mrs. Donovan. Is there anyone going toward the Ellis Ranch that could accompany me? I wouldn't want Jenny and Dan to worry. I'm certain I can find someone. Better yet, Magistrate Call is traveling to Suicide Falls later this morning, I'm told. He would make an excellent chaperone. We can accompany him on the trip. Casper squeezed Catherine's hand. Then Mrs. Donovan, may we purchase food to take along with us? I will see to it. Thus, less than 2 hours later, Catherine had hurried to her sister's and returned with her bags. She was again on her horse as Judge Call climbed into his buggy and snapped the whip. It had been arranged that Catherine and Casper would ride beside him. The sun shone weakly through a veil of thin clouds, yet the wind had died to leave behind slightly warmer temperatures. Snugly wrapped in her thick cloak and the blanket Mrs. Donovan had loaned her, Catherine trotted her horse slightly behind the buggy. Casper estimated that they'd arrive in Suicide Falls before night fell. Just as the sky grew dark, Casper and Catherine reined their horses in at the station. Catherine climbing stiffly down from her horse. I haven't ridden like that in a while, she admitted. I think I'm going to be sore. Walking about will help, Casper said, taking her hand as they climbed the steps to the platform. He knocked on the door, seeing Catherine shiver as the wind picked up. He suspected more snow would fall before midnight. The wooden door creaked open to reveal old Mr. Newcomb holding a lantern. Marshall? What can I do for you? This is my fiancée, Miss Catherine Lind, he said. Your wife invited her to stay with you if she came to town. Of course, of course. Yes, do come in, the old man said, standing aside and swinging the door wider. We are about to sit down to supper. The wife would be pleased to have you dine with us. And Mrs. Newcomb was indeed pleased. Fussing over Catherine, she made certain the girl sat closest to the stove in the kitchen, and she served up a delicious lamb stew that warmed Casper through. It's so lovely to have such a pretty guest, Mrs. Newcomb commented, patting Catherine's hand. Dear, you stay as long as you like. Thank you, Catherine answered. Christmas is but a few weeks away, the woman said, her voice wistful. I remember my first Christmas with Mr. Newcomb. Such sweet romance. Now you children will have a chance at a first holiday together. Catherine glanced at Casper, who obviously worked to suppress a grin. I would adore being married on Christmas Eve, Catherine admitted, blushing. After supper, she walked with Casper to the door as he put his coat and hat back on. I will see you tomorrow. Unless you're struck blind, he said, chuckling. Bending, he pressed a light, chaste kiss to her lips. Good night, Catherine. Good night, Casper. With a quick wink, Casper let himself out into the cold night. Chapter 8. Casper returned early the next morning, riding his Mustang and bringing Catherine's gelding with him. As she came out the door, wearing her thick wool cloak and fur-lined gloves, she glanced to Mrs. Newcomb for approval to go riding with him. At her nod, Catherine walked down the steps, noticing he wore both a gun at his hip and the marshal's badge on his coat. I thought to show you around my town, he explained, helping her mount and waving at the Newcombs. Suicide Falls is a bit larger than Plum River. How long have you been the town marshal? She asked as they rode side by side down the main road. Are you on duty right now? After the previous night's snowfall, the street had been churned into a mud-slush mixture by wheels and hooves, with people braving the chill air to be about their business. Catherine noticed a few matrons wrapped in shawls and warm hats walking down the sidewalks or riding in buggies. A few children walked to the schoolhouse, which was located a block off the main street. Workmen were wrapping lamp posts with bright silver and red ribbons in celebration of the Christmas season. Always on duty, he answered, waving to people as they passed. 5 years now. My folks brought me here when I was still a boy. I learned the law under Judge Call's predecessor and was elected marshal. Where are your parents now? Denver, in Colorado Territory. My pa is a lawyer and was offered a partnership in a firm there. They moved away soon after I was elected marshal. They gave me their house. It's over there. Casper pointed to a pleasant-looking two-story house with a light brown picket fence surrounding a large yard. He grinned. Plenty of room for raising a family. Catherine blushed. It seems like a very nice house. I'd love to show it to you, but that wouldn't be appropriate right now. My parents left me most everything to make their move easier. Catherine noticed that Casper seemed quite popular with the folks they passed. Women called out his name, waving, and men tipped hats to him as well as to her. One woman, emerging from the hardware store, waved more vigorously. "Marshall Mulroney," she called. "May I see you a moment?" "Duty calls," Casper said with a wink, reining his horse toward the lady. Catherine followed, curious. "Good morning to you, Mrs. Holloway," he said cheerfully, touching the brim of his hat. Before she spoke, the lady stared openly at Catherine, then flicked her glance to Casper and back again, obviously inviting an introduction. "Ah, Mrs. Holloway," Casper said. "May I present my fiancée, Miss Catherine Lind?" "Catherine, this is Mrs. Holloway, wife of our hardware proprietor." "A pleasure, ma'am," Catherine said. "Is this your mail-order bride?" the woman asked, her wrinkles stretching at the side of her eyes. "Why, dear boy, she is lovely. How wonderful to make your acquaintance, miss. How might I help you today?" Casper went on. "Is your husband well?" "That old codger is fine," Mrs. Holloway groused as though wishing otherwise. "Marshall, it's that dog again. Ripped my clean sheets right off the line and dragged them through the mud. This is the third time, Marshall, and I demand you do something about it." "I will speak to the dog's owner, Mrs. Holloway," Casper promised. "The boy keeps forgetting to latch his gate when he goes to school. If it happens again," Mrs. Holloway warned darkly, "I will shoot it. Am I clear, Marshall?" "Completely, Mrs. Holloway." With a sniff, the woman glided down the street, carefully avoiding piles of mud and slush. Casper eyed her with amusement, then reined his horse in the opposite direction. Turning in his saddle, his hand on the Mustang's rump, he grinned at Catherine. "She's harmless," he said. "Likes to make threats but never follows through. So she won't really shoot the dog?" "Nah. She doesn't even own a gun." A woman's scream ripped through the quiet winter air. Jolted, Catherine swung around at the same instant Casper wheeled his horse on its haunches. Not far from where they spoke with Mrs. Holloway, a woman ran into the street wearing only her shift. Even from that distance, Catherine saw the blood on her shoulders and back. A man, wearing trousers and suspenders over his long johns, strode after her, a gun in his hand. "Stop, Leroy," Casper shouted, urging his horse forward. "Leave her alone, man." "Stay out of this, Casper," the man replied without looking up, stalking the woman. "She's my wife and this don't concern you." "He's going to kill me," the woman screamed, clutching her bloody shift. Catherine trotted her horse quickly in Casper's wake, thinking how to help the woman. "Leroy, I mean it now," Casper warned as Leroy smashed his fist into his wife's face, knocking her to the muddy ground. "Let her be. I'll throw you in jail." "I mean it." Casper's hand dropped to the butt of his gun. Traffic on foot, on horseback, and in carriages and wagons halted to watch. A scream rose to Catherine's throat as Leroy lifted his gun and aimed it at his wife. "Leroy, drop the gun," Casper yelled, drawing his own. "I'll shoot you if you don't drop the gun. Drop it now." Leroy pulled back the hammer, his finger tightening on the trigger. Casper fired. Catherine screamed as Leroy slumped to the snow and mud, the pistol falling from his fingers. He howled and grabbed his thigh, which spurted blood. His wife, now dripping blood from her nose and mouth, scrambled away, running barefoot and almost naked down the street. Casper swung toward Catherine, who was staring at him in shock. "Please, Catherine," he said, his eyes wide. "Go after her. Help her." Not knowing what else to do and sickened by what she'd just witnessed, Catherine kicked her horse into a gallop. Passing the townspeople gaping at the drama, she found the woman still running as though she planned to keep fleeing into the snow of the prairie. Catching up to her easily, Catherine reined the horse around in front of her, forcing her to stop. "Please, let me help you." Gasping for breath, the blood on her face still dripping, the girl stared at Catherine. Catherine quickly dismounted, removing her cloak from her shoulders. Swinging it over the woman's shivering body, Catherine rubbed her arms through the wool, trying to warm her up. "We have to get you out of this weather," she said, noticing the woman's feet turning blue with cold. "Come, get up on this horse. I'll take you to the dock." "There is one, isn't there?" Is Leroy dead?" she whispered as Catherine guided her around the horse so she could mount. "I don't think so. Just shot in the leg." Catherine didn't want to think about him. She'd never seen a person beat his wife before, and now her intended husband had shot him. What if the man lost so much blood that he died? Casper would have killed him if that happened. Shivering with more than just the cold, Catherine put her boot in the stirrup and mounted the horse behind the saddle. Holding up the slender girl in front of her, she picked up the reins and urged the horse into a trot back the way they had come. "What's your name?" Catherine asked her. "I'm Melissa." The crowd hadn't dispersed during her absence, but in fact had grown. A few noticed their arrival, one of them Casper, who was telling Judge Call what had happened. He pointed his finger toward them, and the magistrate took in the bloody evidence of Melissa's condition. "Is there a doctor?" Catherine asked the man nearest to them. "Right there, kneel in, by Leroy," he answered, then spat. Leroy got his just deserts, alus beaten on the poor girl. In her arms, the young woman began to sob. Knowing she might get ill from the cold, Catherine said, "I have to get her somewhere warm. Will you send the doctor to the Newcombs?" The man tipped his hat. "Sure will, miss." Guiding the horse around the crowd, and avoiding Casper's eyes, Catherine urged the horse into a lope. Down the muddy street, kicking up muck behind them, she held Melissa in the saddle while trying not to fall off herself. She hadn't ridden horses enough in her life to be a good rider, and she thanked God the horse wasn't inclined to buck. Reining to a sharp stop at the Newcomb station, she started yelling the instant she slid from the beast's rump. "Please help," she called out. "Mr. Newcomb, help, please." Melissa seemed only partly conscious as Catherine helped her down from the saddle. Knowing she wasn't strong enough to carry her, Catherine shook her, gently patting her face to get her to wake. "Come on, you have to walk now, Melissa. It's not far. Mr. Newcomb. You there?" The door swung wide, revealing both husband and wife. "Dear Lord," Mrs. Newcomb exclaimed, and Mr. Newcomb hurried down the steps to support the girl on her other side. Between them, they managed to get Melissa into the station and through to the Newcomb's home. "Take her into the room you stayed in," Mrs. Newcomb said, quickly closing the door to keep the cold out. "Wrap her warm, and I'll get the hot water bottles." Together, Catherine and Mr. Newcomb got Melissa to the bed and placed her in it, mud and all. Catherine covered her with quilts, and Mr. Newcomb muttered something about building up the fire and vanished. The girl continued to shiver violently, her lips blue with cold. Catherine brushed her muddy, wet hair from her face, thinking that she should have gotten her out of her wet shift before putting her in the bed. As though reading her mind, Mrs. Newcomb bustled in with hot water bottles and said, "Once we warm her up, we'll get her out of that wet thing and dress her wounds. Heat first." "I asked that the doctor be sent," Catherine replied, raising the quilts long enough for Mrs. Newcomb to place the rubber bottles near Melissa's cold feet and on her stomach. "That old coot will take his time," she snorted. "So, while we wait, why don't you tell us what happened?" Mr. Newcomb listened from the doorway, as Catherine told them about Leroy chasing his wife into the street, aiming his gun to shoot her. "So Casper shot him," she said, tears choking her throat. "Just flat out shot him. I never saw a man shoot someone before." "Fool deserved it," Mr. Newcomb muttered, his mild face suffused with anger. Marshall was justified. But Catherine had no idea how to express what she was feeling. Of course, this poor girl had needed help. She needed rescuing. But did Casper have to shoot him? What if the bullet had gone higher? What if Casper had killed the man? Catherine shuddered, feeling miserable. It's just that, well, Casper shot him. Does he shoot a lot of people? How can I marry someone who? Mrs. Newcomb patted her arm. Don't you start fussing about that, child. Let us get this girl on her feet before we go to worrying about weddings. Trying hard to stifle the horror of what she witnessed, Catherine sniffed back her tears. Mrs. Newcomb demanded her husband fetch a basin of hot water and soap. Reaching under the quilts, Catherine found Melissa warming up, and her lips weren't quite as blue. But her feet were still terribly cold, and Catherine feared frostbite. Mr. Newcomb deposited a steaming basin in the room, then departed, closing the door behind him. Mrs. Newcomb and Catherine urged Melissa to her feet. The girl cried out as she stood, and the two of them stripped her of her wet muddy shift. Standing her on a thick towel, they washed her body of wet mud, cleaning her wounds of dried blood. What did he hit you with, Melissa? Catherine asked, kneeling to wash and warm her feet as quickly as possible. Fortunately, they were bright red, but not black. A whip, she answered, her arms wrapped around herself. Real men don't beat their wives, Mrs. Newcomb grated, rubbing Melissa's body briskly with a towel to restore circulation. He was going to kill me, she said and began to cry. Now, girl, don't waste your tears over the likes of him, Mrs. Newcomb stated firmly. He's a mean old cuss when he gets drunk, and everyone knows it. He got what he deserved. Mrs. Newcomb told Catherine where to find a flannel gown for Melissa, then stripped the bed of the wet and muddy linens. Catherine dressed Melissa in the warm gown, and Mrs. Newcomb made up the bed with fresh linens and blankets. Melissa retreated into it as Mrs. Newcomb hurried out to make hot tea. Catherine pushed the still warm bottles against Melissa's feet, tucking the quilts and blankets around her once more. Thank you, Melissa whispered, her eyes closed. You are so kind. What's your name? Catherine. She smiled without opening her eyes. Beautiful name. As Melissa lapsed into sleep, her breathing evening out, Catherine sat on the edge of the bed. With the rush of saving Melissa's life over with, she now had time to think over her own fate. Could she marry a man who shot people for a living? While she of course knew her fiancé was a marshal, seeing him in action was another thing entirely. And she'd seen Casper's face. It had turned ugly when he pulled the trigger. Catherine had no idea how to handle this. Could Casper be a stone-cold killer? How many men had he killed in the past? She hadn't thought to even ask such a question. Over and over, she reminded herself that he shot Leroy only after warning him and only when Melissa's life hung in the balance. But no matter how often she told herself that, she now feared Casper and the blood on his hands. She rose from the bed when Mrs. Newcomb ushered in the aging doctor. After examining the girl, he announced that Melissa's feet would heal in time with no frostbite. Feed her warm broth and tea, he said, stumping out. She'll be fine in a few days. After showing the doctor out, Mrs. Newcomb returned. Marshal Mulroney asks to see you, she said. Catherine pressed her back against the wall. I don't want to see him right now. Chapter 9. Casper couldn't believe what Mr. Newcomb told him. She said what? Give her time, boy, the old man said, pushing Casper into the chair next to the stove. He creaked his way into the other and brought out his pipe from his pocket. Some women folks are more tender-hearted than others. You're a girl and there don't know you from Adam, remember? She's seen you shoot a man. Course she's gonna get the shakes. If I hadn't shot him, Melissa would be dead. And Leroy would be dead because he'd hang for murder. Casper sat back in the chair, unable to get warm despite his close proximity to the stove. He saw Catherine ride in search of Melissa, feeling his pride in her courage to help. She had guts enough to overcome her shock at seeing a man shot to ride in search of the man's victim, then ride back and take Melissa to warmth and healing. No doubt, Catherine saved Melissa's life. I don't understand, he said, his tone agitated. Even Judge Call said it was a good shoot. Justified. Half the town witnessed it. Everyone knows Leroy is a bad egg, and he was clearly seen beating his wife and he intended to kill her. That's right, boy. Seeming unconcerned with his guest's emotional dilemma, Mr. Newcomb packed his pipe with tobacco and lit it with a stick from the stove. He sucked on it until he was content, then waved the pipe at Casper. Give her time. Your Catherine is a good girl. You should have seen how she worked to get that lil gal warm. Because of your Catherine, that gal is keeping all her toes, mind you. I wish I could have seen it. No one else thought to go after her when she run off, Mr. Newcomb added. All the folks in this town done watched a half-naked girl run barefoot down the street awash in frozen mud and snow and didn't lift a finger. Your girl did, and did it proper. Had Casper not felt despair over possibly losing Catherine, he knew his pride in her would surge again. She had guts, that was for certain. While he wrestled with his own conscience for having shot the man, however justified, he worried over losing Catherine. And in the back of his mind, he wasn't all that certain that Leroy would survive. Had he the choice, he would have disarmed Leroy, then ordered him to stop beating his young wife. But beating one's wife wasn't against the law. If Leroy continued, there wasn't anything Casper could legally do about it. Go home, boy. He glanced at Mr. Newcomb's contented face, backlit by his glowing pipe. Go home now and come back tomorrow. Give Catherine a night to sleep on things, and I'll bet you she'll come around tomorrow. Casper rose, his hat in his hand. I'll take her horse to my barn, he said, his tone quiet. He's still tied up out front. That's mighty good of you, boy. I'll let her know that. Outside, a light snow fell, dusting his coat, already covering the saddles of the two horses. Down the street, lamps shone brightly through the misty night, and he listened to the faint piano music emerging from the saloon. Dark figures hurried down the sidewalks toward hearth and home, and a few riders trotted through the sludge that was the main street. Turning his face up to the dark sky, Casper closed his eyes, feeling the feather-light touch of the snow on his cheeks. Lord, if you're really there, he murmured, don't let me lose her. I love her already. I love her. Untying the reins to both horses, he swung into Jackson's saddle and pulled the other gelding in behind. Sloshing through the muck, he tried not to think of the life that could end this day at his hand. Suicide Falls was a peaceful town without much excitement. Usually he only arrested rambunctious cowboys on Saturday nights during the spring and summer months. Now he'd faced shooting someone. He'd always thought his gun at his hip was only for show, as he'd pulled it as a threat more than once before. He actually felt surprised that he'd had to use it that day. Taking the horses into the small barn behind his house, he unsaddled them, rubbed them down and put each into stalls with plenty of hay and water to last them the night. Knowing the house would be very cold and hard to heat, he seized an armload of firewood and went inside, dumping it beside the kitchen stove. Then he went back for more. Once both the stove and the hearth fires were lit and blazing, he still felt the deep inner chill of having shot a man. Would the scene lodge in his mind forever? He dared let his thoughts roam to Catherine. What was she doing at that moment? Did she sleep, warm in the safety of the Newcombs' home? Was she thinking of him? Would she consent to see him, permit him to show her who he really was? Show her that he didn't enjoy shooting men? He'd spooked her. But what had she expected? She knew he was a marshal. Didn't she realize what came with the job? Standing beside the crackling flames, warming his hands, he stared deep into the fire and knew he wouldn't sleep that night. Chapter 10. Rolled into blankets on the rug beside the bed, Catherine woke with a toe poking her ribs. At first, still half asleep, she thought it was Jenny's foot interrupting her slumber, as she used to do when they were still children sharing a bedroom. But when the toe returned, more insistent, she woke and stared around her. She wasn't in their shared room in Illinois. She lay on the floor and it was Melissa's toe that woke her. She turned her head. Morning, Melissa said, smiling. I woke you up to see if you want to sleep in the bed. I've slept enough. Catherine sat up, stiff from sleeping on the hard floor, yawning, but now awake enough to know she wouldn't sleep again soon. "How are you feeling?" Melissa stretched out her feet, pink and healthy and whole. "Sore from the cuts on me," she admitted. "But otherwise, I'm fine. Thanks to you." "You should get more rest," Catherine said, getting to her feet and stretching. "Doc says so." Melissa snorted. "I'm fine. Hungry, but better than being dead." Catherine tried to smile. She sat on the bed beside the girl, feeling terrible at what she had to say next. "Melissa," she began, "it was my fiancé who shot your husband." Melissa brightened immediately. "The marshal is your fiancé? You are such a lucky girl." Catherine stiffened and Melissa embraced her. "But, I feel awful bad about it all," Catherine said. Melissa sat back, staring at her. She drew a blanket around her in the chilly room. "But why?" Catherine floundered. "My fiancé could have killed your husband." Melissa's expression went hard. "To save my life. Leroy beats me senseless several times a week. I knew one day he'd try to kill me. I'll thank God on my knees every day for bringing your man there when he did." Shocked, Catherine stood. "But, don't you see? You was there. I'd be dead." "But..." Melissa sighed heavily. "It weren't always like this. I'm not a total idiot. Leroy did feed me and put clothes on my back, when he wasn't ripping them off." She snorted and her voice thickened. "I hope he does die. I need another husband. Ah, don't give me that look. Think if it was you. Perhaps I can write to the agency again." Catherine tilted her head. "Agency?" Melissa nodded. "I answered Leroy's letter for a bride and married him not knowing what a beast he was." "You were a mail-order bride?" Catherine could barely get the words out. Now Melissa cocked her head. "Yes. And I'm guessing you is, too." Catherine nodded. "My sister was also, and married a rancher in Plum River. I was staying with her while I got to know Casper, the marshal." "Well, you done better than me. You got a good one. You hang on to him with both hands." Catherine gazed at the floor. "But," she shook her head. "I saw his face when he shot your man. It was ugly, and I can't get it out of my head. I'm scared of him," she finally admitted. Wrapped in a quilt, her bare legs exposed, Melissa scowled and stood up. "Marshal Mulroney saved my life, Catherine, and don't you forget it. Leroy is a very bad man, and if you're scared of the marshal, then you have no idea what being scared is. I lived in terror for 6 months, trapped in his house, never permitted to leave. I figured every day would be my last. I married a beast. A cruel, heartless beast. I never knew it at first. Not until the 2nd week passed. Then I realized Leroy is a monster." Melissa drew in a deep breath and started at Catherine. "You got no idea what real fear is." Catherine stood up and wrapped Melissa into her arms, quilt and all. "I'm so sorry for what you went through," she said, tears choking her. "It could have happened to me. Or my sister. But it didn't. And you should marry the marshal. Even before he shot Leroy, I knew the marshal's reputation. He's decent. A decent man." She gazed into Melissa's stormy eyes. "What will happen if Leroy survives? What will you do?" Melissa shook her head. "I'm getting out of here. Leroy's got money. I know where he keeps it. This is my chance. I'm gonna take enough to get out of here. Start over someplace else." Panic filled her face. "You won't tell. You'll keep quiet, won't you?" Catherine nodded. "Of course, I will. I hope you get away. If he dies, will you tell me? But I won't know where you are." "All right. I won't be using my real name or folks would find me. But you'll know it's me. I like this town. If I can, I'll come back. And we'll be friends." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "And we'll be friends," she repeated. Chapter 11. Caspar saddled Jackson but left Catherine's gelding to munch hay in the barn. Hoping against hope that the night had changed Catherine's fears toward him, he rode toward the station and the Newcombs' home. He hadn't slept all night, just stared from his armchair into the flames of the hearth and pondered life and death. With eyes that stung and blurred, he rode down the main street of Suicide Falls and ignored the congratulatory waves and calls that emanated all around him. Had the man died? He needed to check. He stopped in at the docks and gaped at the draped body lying on the cot. "So, he's dead, huh?" Caspar asked, the truth of it slamming into him. "He's dead," the doc answered. "I know I'm meant to be saving lives, but this one was a bad one. Good riddance, I say." Caspar flinched at the doctor's words, even though he agreed. He just wished the man's death wouldn't be on his conscience. With a heavy sigh, he left the doctor's and continued on to the Newcombs'. Did Catherine already know? It was clear that many did. But did Catherine? And what would she think of him, knowing Leroy was dead? The Newcomb place seemed eerily silent as he dismounted and tied Jackson to the rail. Climbing the steps, he gazed around, finding nothing alarming in the area. Yet, before he knocked on the door, yells abounded from down the street. He untied Jackson in a single motion, and vaulted into the saddle. Jackson hit a gallop before Caspar's boots even hit the stirrups. The noises emanated from the saloon, and Jackson's rear hooves slid in the muck into a neat stop at the rail. Caspar was out of the saddle before the Mustang stopped moving. Plunging into the near darkness of the saloon, Caspar paused to let his eyes adjust. "Marshal Mulroney here," he hollered, listening to the shouts and dying wails of the inhabitants. Had they been there all night? The saloon wasn't usually open for business in the morning. "What's going on? Someone talk to me." As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he saw the piano player struggle to his feet. Rushing over, Caspar sat him on his stool, seeing the fresh blood on his brow. "What happened?" Coughing, the man leaned against him, shaking. "Don't know. I was playing, as I usually do, then wham. Got hit on the head." "Stay there." Caspar propped him against his piano, then ventured further into the saloon. He saw Ned Barlow lying on the floor, gasping, blood pouring from cuts on his head. No less than 3 others lay in the same condition. He crouched next to each one, determining all would live with fierce headaches to remind them of this day. Yet none he asked could tell him exactly what happened. Each man claimed he was playing cards, enjoying the music when they got struck on the head. Who was it? None of the 6 men, including the barkeep and the piano player, recognized their assailant. Caspar helped all of them outside, despite the cold weather, in case the lunatic was still inside. The bar was only lit with the hearth fire, the barkeep said, his handkerchief pressed to his bloody brow. "Kinda dark. This guy came in and walloped me on the head. Don't remember nothing more until I saw you. I only stayed open for that poker game. They was paying double. What a fool I was. Did the man rob the place?" The man shrugged, shaking his head. "Check the till, Marshal." "I don't know." When Caspar ventured back inside, he found the till full of money. Shutting the drawer, he walked about the mess on the floor, examining the broken chairs, the poker chips and cash on the floor, the blood on the piano keys. He squatted on his heels, examining the traces of snow and mud when he saw a shadow move. Rising instantly, he moved, spinning toward the movement. His hand dropped to the butt of his gun. "Don't move," he warned. "Caspar." The whispering voice rose on the final syllable, bringing a shiver down his spine. "Leroy, is that you?" He didn't completely recognize the voice, had no idea how it knew his name. Was it Leroy's ghost come back to exact his vengeance? The shadow moved toward him, and Caspar drew his gun. "Stay back. Caspar. Show yourself." The shadow obeyed him, moving into the firelight. Casper had one instant to recognize Watson with a huge chunk of wood in his hands, swinging it over his head. The wood connected with Casper's skull, and he knew nothing more. Chapter 12. I'll come with you, Catherine offered, when Melissa announced at breakfast she wanted to go home and sort through Leroy's things. Perhaps I can help. That would be nice, Melissa replied, rising from the table to help wash dishes. Her nose and cheek still appeared red and swollen from Leroy's fist, and she moved with a stiffness that indicated pain. Catherine had checked the whiplashes over her shoulders and back, finding them healing, but crusty with growing scabs. She helped Melissa dress in one of Mrs. Newcomb's gowns, trying not to laugh as the clothing hung off her new friend. Like Catherine, Melissa was small and petite, while Mrs. Newcomb owned a larger, bustier frame. You drop that now, young lady, Mrs. Newcomb ordered. I can handle washing my own dishes. You gals have business to be about. Thanks ever so much for your kindness and hospitality, Melissa said with a small curtsy. I'll return the dress later today. Thus wrapped in warm cloaks, Catherine and Melissa stepped out of the station into the chilly morning, overcast by dark clouds threatening snow. They passed a woman Melissa evidently knew. The woman paused, stared at Melissa, and clucked her tongue. He's dead, you know. Your husband. Catherine froze. Leroy had died? So, Casper had killed him. A wave of nausea swirled through her and she clasped Melissa's hand hard. The woman moved off, and Catherine worked to catch her breath. Good, Melissa said before Catherine could say a word. I'm glad. Good riddance to him. Catherine stared at her. She understood why Melissa would say such things. She did. But still, she felt sick. Leaning on each other, they made their way down the street. It's going to be a hard Christmas, Melissa whispered. I ain't never been alone at Christmas before. Come spend it with me and my sister in Plum River. Melissa eyed her. So. That's it, then. You've given up on the Marshal? I don't know, Catherine replied slowly. I thought I was falling in love with him, but it's all so confusing. I wanted so much to have Christmas in my own house, with a loving husband beside me. Now I'm wondering if I should wait. Longer, to be sure. Why wait? To give me more time to know him. Why? He ain't going to change over the course of a few weeks. He did what he had to do, and that's not going to change neither. By doubting him, you're gonna destroy the love you have buildin' between you. Catherine remained silent. She knew in her heart that her new friend was right. But still. Yet, Casper had saved a life by taking a life. Had he not shot Leroy, Melissa would be dead. Catherine remembered her father's comment about Casper, that he was a protector. It was his job to protect the citizens of Suicide Falls. Just as he would protect her. She tried putting herself in Melissa's shoes. If she had married a man like Leroy, wouldn't she want the town's marshal to protect her? Of course, she would. Yells and shouts pulled Catherine from her reverie. Someone get the doc. The marshal's been hurt bad. Get the doc over here. Chapter 13. Men boiled around the saloon, jostling one another, yelling, helping men with blood on their heads to sit on the sidewalk. 3 others wrestled a man against the wall of the saloon and tied his hands behind his back. Catherine stood frozen, staring at the commotion. And then 2 men carried another out of the saloon on a blanket. No, she cried. She broke into a run, hiking her skirts above her ankles, panic tearing her throat. Casper was hurt, maybe dead. Raw fear threatened to swamp her, but she forced her emotions to the back of her mind. Casper needed her, and he needed her with a clear head. She caught up with the men as they sought to take Casper into his office. Yanking the door open for them, she followed them inside, unable to see past the men to Casper. What happened? She cried, trying to shove her way through. Got attacked, miss, one grunted, lugging Casper's dead weight into a cell. That lunatic Jackson bashed his head with a club. Marshall got it bad. They lay Casper on a cot and covered him with a blanket, then backed out of the cell. We need the doc, one of them said. I'm going. Dropping to her knees beside the cot, Catherine brushed Casper's dark hair away from the wound on the side of his head. It still oozed blood, but to her untrained eye it didn't look deep. But what about under it? Was his skull crushed? Behind her, she heard Melissa barking orders. Someone get a fire going in that stove. Where's that doctor? We need hot water, cloths, bandages. Casper's breathing was slow and even, and his pulse under her fingers seemed strong. Trying to convince herself that these were good signs, panic still ate at the edge of her mind. Was she going to lose this fine man, just when she came to the realization that he, her protector, had been right and justified in shooting Leroy? Come away, miss. Let me in there. Catherine felt Melissa tugging on her shoulder, and she rose to step away as the doctor, his black bag in hand, went into the cell with Casper. Catherine held Melissa's hand tightly as they both watched him tend to Casper's wounds. One of the men deposited a bucket of steaming water beside the cot and heaped cloths and bandages beside it. He'll be all right, Melissa whispered. A disturbance at the office door heralded men shoving another man, his hands bound behind his back, across the room and into the second cell. They clanged the metal gate shut, locking it, then left Casper's office. Only Catherine and Melissa, the man in the cell, and the doctor with Casper remained inside. Catherine stared at the man who hurt Casper, trying to fathom why such a quiet-seeming man would attack others. The fellow stared at Casper for a time, his lips twisted in what Catherine thought might be pain, then sat down on the cot. Why did you do this? She accused him, her voice rising. The man didn't answer, only gazed at the floor. That's Watson, Melissa said, her voice low. He goes crazy sometimes, but usually breaks furniture. The marshal always said he was harmless, but I guess he was wrong. Catherine returned her attention to the doctor, who hummed as he sewed Casper's wound closed. Will he be all right? Yes, he replied. Lucky for him, he's got a hard Irish head. He'll need rest and quiet for a few days, however. Catherine breathed easier at the doctor's answer and hugged Melissa. Thank you for being here with me. Friends do that for each other. You was with me. The doctor left, muttering about all his other patients. Melissa went to her own house on the heels of a promise to come by later. Catherine dragged a chair into the cell to sit beside Casper. She wanted to be there when he woke. She settled in and held his hand. Hours passed slowly, and folks came by to check on him. They asked if Catherine needed anything. Mrs. Newcomb trundled in with a sandwich for her and insisted upon making her hot tea before returning home. The afternoon was waning when Casper finally stirred, groaned, and opened his eyes. Hell's teeth, he muttered, trying to raise his hand to his bandaged head. When he discovered it was snared in Catherine's, he gave her a sheepish smile. Sorry for the cussing, he murmured. My head is pounding like a hammer. Catherine lifted his hand to kiss it. You're going to be all right. I was so scared I would lose you. You can't lose me yet, he said, his voice scratchy. I haven't kissed you under the mistletoe. She laughed, tears burning her eyes. Then I'm going to hang sprigs of it all over the house. He coughed hoarsely and licked his lips. Then I'm goin' to be busy this Christmas, he drawled, closing his eyes. Got to cut down a tree, help my new bride decorate it. Wait. His eyes opened. You are going to marry me, then? Catherine bent over him to rest her lips against his, kissing him lovingly, lingering, tasting him for the first time. Gazing into his eyes, she said, What do you think? He reached up and touched her shoulder. I think I better get well real quick. Can we get married on Christmas Eve? Will you be well enough? Catherine asking, sighing happily at the thought. I'll be well if it kills me. He tried to laugh. Can Melissa come to spend Christmas Day with us? Who? Oh, of course. Anything you want, my sweet bride. I reckon if we're going to plan a wedding, I better get up. As he started to rise, Catherine planted her hands on his chest and pushed him back down. You are staying right where you are. Why? I'm all right. Although, he winced when he spoke the words. No, you're not all right. Not yet. Besides, I want you lying there so I can do this. She kissed him again, feeling love for him well up inside her. She drew back and looked into his eyes and smiled. By God's grace, her hopes and dreams of having her own home and husband on Christmas would come true, after all. She smiled at him again, a bit shyly this time. This was going to be the Christmas of her dreams. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Susanna Calloway. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Susanna Calloway, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Susanna Calloway Western romance.